Hello.
And maybe
Hello.
now we're live.
All right. We
Well, how
got
is
that
everybody
far.
today?
Yay.
Yay, we did it!
It's beautiful and snowing.
Oh,
Oh my goodness. Do keep that over there.
right,
Yeah,
right. Because
I'm not thrilled.
We
I
No.
don't need
can't.
it down here. We got enough issues.
Yeah, I can't say that it's beautiful, but it is like I don't know, 65-ish degrees, but it's cloudy. We're gonna get rain. So, Um, if I'm sketchy on my signal, that's probably why, because down here in Vincent, Alabama, I guess I could log into the coffee shop internet, but I'm afraid I'll kick myself off. You know how that goes. I'm technically challenged. So, welcome to the show, everybody. Episode 4, new day, new time, new hostesses. Well, Gail has been with us, but we're officially seeing her face today, and we have Adrian and Jess, of course, is welcome everybody. And y'all, Gail informed me earlier, it is National Women's Day. So, power to the women. And
Woohoo!
That's
right.
right.
And what a good day to start talking about the history of witches and, how
True.
it came to be that so many, not only women, but women were a huge target of the hangings, the burnings, the swimming of the witches. Um, did all of you watch that documentary? I mean, is it a
Yes.
documentary? Do we officially call it a documentary?
Yeah, I
Kind
think
of,
so.
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, I looked at it as a documentary, and for me, much like when I first watched The Passion of the Christ, because no matter where you stand, you know, in religion, watching that and knowing that all that happened to a human being, it was really hard to watch. And for me,
Mhm.
when I watched this documentary, and y'all will put it in the comments later where you can find this documentary that we're talking about. Um, I think we're going to talk about more than one. We're going to let Gail kick off here in a minute because it all kind of went really wrong with it because of my location. Jess, can you step in and speak up and say the name of the person? Because I think there's like a church chat going on over here. And let me not
Oh,
get kicked out
Oh,
of.
are we talking about King James?
Yes, Gal.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, so when I have to bleep myself here, y'all know why because I
how have you
it,
how have you managed to be at a cafe for a witch show next to a prayer group?
usually that does not happen. Today's the first day that we've done it on Friday at this time, so my
Mm,
bad. This should be an interesting show, y'all.
That should be very interesting.
So
You know,
back to the matter at hand here. So yes, Gail is going to kind of lead us into how this person came to be the psychopathic, crazy person that they ended up being. Um, but it also does have to do with why so many women, children, and men along in that were also, you know, um, burned and drowned and tortured and stoned and for people that don't know, I mean, I learned what actual stoning was, by watching that. Because you don't really you think of it as they're throwing stones at you, and you're getting clobbered to death until you die, and that's really not what stoning is. So I'm gonna ask y'all, Adrian, we'll start with you since you're in the top corner up there. Um, what did you think of it? How did it affect you?
you know, watching something like that, your mind goes back and forth as far as if it were now, how, you know, we look at people and think, you know, they have an attachment or they're possessed or if they are different than us or if they say something different, or their beliefs are different, or they act different. Well, no, that's not necessarily they're possessed. And, we've come a long ways, but we haven't come that far that we don't accept everybody.
You're real, and would you not agree that, of course, we could get into a whole, political, but we won't. But it is, things, with women's rights and stuff, the way that has changed here recently. I mean, my God, we're not that far from that. From what they were doing, and what was 1700. I'm really bad with dates, y'all. I do good to remember my own birthday these days. So,
I don't want you.
right, even though I was watching something about said person last night, because Gail had said she was going to bring up how we got to worry. So I went back to where was he born? What did happen before the big book was printed? you know, um, and to be honest with you, I think I got about 15 minutes into it and I fell asleep.
Yeah.
Well, you know how
Yeah.
my works. Everything's a research project. So,
Right, right.
it's
So,
I am.
right. So I'm going to end with you, Gail, because we're going to let you lead off from there. Jess, what did you think of it?
The parts that I watched, it was hard. I could watch it, but it was also hard to watch.
It is. It's really, and to be honest, I was going to watch it again last night to, refresh my memory because it has been a while. For me, I watched it in its entirety, and I've watched it a couple of different times, probably 3 times in its
I
entirety.
did manage to get the vast majority of it, but I think
Yeah,
everybody knows I've been sick for a week,
right.
so
But and it is very difficult to watch if you're an
it
empath
is.
and
I
you
found it
know that
hard.
these were real people and these things happen for stupid reasons. So,
Yeah,
which,
just because they were different.
right, which is going to lead us into Gail. You give us your thoughts on this.
The documentary, after I deep dived into the history, that on the documentary was mellow compared to what they did to some other people earlier in history. And there's so much to say historically. But it starts out with the Bible, literally, and the church. And
Well, the Malus Maleficarium, which was, of course, before the Bible, which I know you're going to get into that too.
it's
But,
even it's even before that, because the actual issue of witchcraft is goes back to like the 400. So
right,
there,
right.
and the torturing systems that they've used are, I can't even believe human beings can even think of doing those things to people, let alone doing them.
I know, right?
It's horrible. But the history part, if you want me to dive into it now, it the so the Bible is at the crux of things, and there is sort of a, in the present day period, a mixing of heresy, which is uh, rebelling against the church or the religion that's in charge, and then witchcraft, which is the practicing of a craft, um, kind of stemming from paganism, but it was all over the world. So we had healers and people that were doing healing work all over the world. The words kind of get mishmashed together in the Middle Ages. So heretics were also witches, and I think it just is a problem of definition. Heretics basically are going against the church. Witches got grouped into that because they were also going against societal norms. So the words got mishmashed together. Um, it accelerated around the 1200s in continental Europe. It got insane. They estimated, I got to get my number here, 110,000 people were killed as heretics or witches. or I'm just going to go to saying witches because it's the way.
Right. It's the same thing. It's the
Yeah.
same thing.
I mean, it's one is going against the church and one is a practice, but then it became if you practice, you are going against the church.
Right. Yeah. If you weren't in that club,
Right.
then you were basically labeled a witch or a heretic.
I am going to say that there's some really famous people. Leonardo da Vinci was accused of heresy. The Templar Knights were all accused of heresy and they were burned. Anne Askew, which is in the period you're talking about with Mr. King James, um, she was killed, tortured and killed. Literally had her limbs pulled from her body, had to be carried to the fire in a chair. That bad.
That's unbelievable. I mean,
Yeah.
and these people were. It just my brain again. Through all of this, a term that I like to use is it splats against the skull wall,
Mm, yeah.
and it takes a while for it to come back together. And this is one of those moments that when you think about the people behind this and what they still represent today to a large majority of people, it's fucking scary.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of the background of, definition of what it is and the church and how they're involved, and a lot of people were sentenced by a court of the church. And the predominant church at the time was Catholicism. Um Time period you're talking about, they're starting to split off into some Protestant sects and Lutheran sects, and um that even in some ways just accelerated it more because then you've got religions fighting against each other and trying to perfect their people so that they're superior.
Wow, does that sound familiar? History repeating itself.
Kind of.
Doesn't it
Holy
always though?
shit.
It always does. It always comes back around.
So King James himself. So we'll get to that dude. That dude is interesting. So he's King James the fourth, no, sixth of Scotland, King James the first of England. The reason he became that is because Elizabeth the first did not have any children, and Mary Queen of Scots was her cousin. That was James's mother. So there were other people that could have taken the crown, but he was the one named by Elizabeth. So that's how he ended up being in charge of the schoolhouse, so to speak. Um,
And he was like
Not
young.
stable.
Well, he was not stable and he was really young. What was he, like 16?
Oh no, he actually was king probably by the time he was 5 or 6.
Well, yeah, I knew that. Yeah, last night where I did fall asleep, that they were talking about. He was, you know, taught all these languages and stuff by the time he was 6 years old. I'm like, come on now, really,
No,
really.
there's some reasoning behind that, and I think so. He was king of Scotland before he was king of England, if that makes sense, because the countries weren't tied together.
Right. Yes. And when Elizabeth died, then he kind of
Yeah.
moved. Yeah. And
So you
I
know,
have theories of. Again, we'll get to my theories on that.
yeah.
The moving from Scotland to England, and I've got my theories on how this book, why and how the thought process of him. But we'll get to that. You go right ahead, Gail.
Okay, so his mother's Mary Queen of Scots. She's imprisoned when he is an infant, by Elizabeth, and she's moved from one prison to another. So this guy doesn't have a mommy. He's given over to the lairds of Scotland, so the chieftains of these different clans, and he's raised by mostly his uncle, but also these lairds have all kinds of influence on him. So there's no women involved. This is just this just little tiny boy being raised by men. His dad, Henry Stewart, was blown up. Some think by his wife, some think by these lairds. But really, it looks to me like they didn't want a female ruler. Mary Queen of Scots was assertive, and they didn't like that. I kind of like the lady. She's haughty. But so he has no parents, no father, no mother, being raised by the political leaders of Scotland. That's where the schooling comes in. And first he's King of Scotland because Elizabeth has Mary put to death. So that's when that moved over. But actually, he was the figurehead before that. And then it just snowballs from there. So I will tell you that there's a lot of substantial information about him being gay, which was not the norm at that time and not well accepted. They were pushing him to get married. He selected, let me get her name right. It's Anne of Denmark. So she's on the continental Europe. He sends ships to bring her to England, Scotland to get married, and storms move in, and she has to turn back to Denmark. They cannot cross the English Channel. So that was one strike. Then he decides he's going to go and get her, and he gets in the ships and goes to cross the English Channel, and he has to turn back because of storms. Okay, so now he's all worked up because something supernatural must be causing these storms. When he finds out,
Exactly. I was going to say, yes,
yeah.
that was all because of witches.
So when he finds
Because,
over to get her, though, the witch trials and the witch burnings and everything on continental Europe are at their peak. So they're probably smelled like barbecue pork when you hit the channel in Denmark because it was just everywhere. And, you didn't have to do anything except own a cat. And you right away tried for witchcraft. So that kind of sets up this. So first thing he does is hire a bunch of people to translate the Bible. I will tell you that the Bible as it is today is nothing like the Bible as it was written. It's been translated 3 times that I know of, major translations. And the original prayers don't sound anything like, I've heard them in Aramaic, and they do not sound anything like they do now. So there's some gross interpretation going on there. And then he writes the demonology. And now it's your turn.
well, yes, he goes, and then, so my theory on this is I kind of reference it to living in Alabama. Because one time I lived in this little bitty town down the road, Cook Springs. And my neighbor one day jumps the fence and he runs over and he introduces himself and, asked me where I'd moved from. And, I said, Leeds, which, technically Leeds is this big, in comparison to a big city, right? And he's like, oh, you're from the big city too. And I was like, thinking maybe he's being sarcastic, right? I said, yeah, where are you from? Oh, and he said, Moody, Alabama.
I
And
grew up right near there, and it's about this big. You blink, you miss it.
I mean,
So Leeds
really,
is probably a big city compared.
2 stoplights in Moody. I mean, I think, really. They are getting a little bit better, but at the time I know it was definitely only 2 stoplights. So, and I realized he's being serious. So I realized that, and me and my mom talked about it, and she's like, some of these people in these little small towns here, they've never, been to Birmingham. Birmingham is 20 minutes away. What do you mean? How can you live here and be 50 something years old and you've never been to Birmingham? Really? And you think that Moody is the big city? I mean, it just blew my mind. So anyway, we go back to, I'm just going to call him Jimmy here. So we go back to Jimmy, who grew up in some place like Moody, Alabama, in comparison to the way they thought and believed, and all that. And then he moved to somewhere like New York City. They're a little bit more forward thinking and stuff. They got a little bit more happening here. And this little book that Jimmy wrote, Demonology, they kind of thought, this guy's an idiot. So, in order to prove himself to be, this superior person that Jimmy wanted to be, you know, he brought in all these scholars, to interpret these books and put them in place. And of course, number one is a scare tactic. Let's make people, get in line. And, we're going to make women less than. And, just lots of other things that these particular people felt in their heart and their soul that what they were looking at and something that they didn't even know what the fuck they were reading. So that's my theory on that is he just wanted to kind of prove himself to be a little bit more than the local witch hunter.
I'm going to say that the majority of population couldn't even read. One of the things you could be charged with heresy for is reading the Bible yourself instead of somebody else reading and interpreted.
Right. Yes, I know that it used to be, someone of higher and definitely not a woman.
Definitely not a woman.
Definitely not a woman. I mean, that was just a woman with any kind of knowledge for anything back then. I mean, y'all think about these women that were, taken out of this world too soon. Imagine the things that could have been done. You know, because they obviously knew some little, whether they knew putting a clover in their tea would, make them feel better for this, that, or whatever. That made them a witch, But so imagine how many great minds were wiped off the freaking planet before they ever even got a chance, And that's some scary crap. And I kind of see it happening today, and it's still some scary crap.
Yeah, it looks like it's looping around again.
So, Gail, how did Jimmy's mind get so twisted?
Well,
I mean,
um,
other than the obvious, we got mommy issues, we got daddy issues.
there
But
was no softness in his upbringing, no nurturing in his
right,
upbringing. So they are basically building him up to be a ruler from the time that he could crawl. So there's no parents. Um, so there's that huge detachment kind of thing that happens. He was spoiled. So, back in the day, it wasn't unusual for other people of state to send their children to be raised in the same household so that this guy could pick on them, basically. They weren't allowed to fight back. They were, if they got into games of competition, then the king, it was required that this future king always won. So he's super entitled, indulged, pampered. Um, and I think just there's a paranoia that goes along with that. You don't have touch with reality. And then when anything happens, it looks magical. I don't want to say magical, something scarier than magical, because magical is wonderful. But he just thinks everything is happening because somebody is interrupting what God intends to happen. So the other thing is that royalty at the time, and still to this day, they are chosen by God. So and I'm talking about the God of
right,
the Catholic Church.
right. The bloodline. Yeah,
Yep. Yep.
yeah.
Guess who has the bloodline? Doesn't mean shit. I live in a cottage. I live in a cottage. in a one light town, I might add. There is no money involved here. So it's like
Right.
I don't know why that. I think it was a way of consolidating power. And you never hear in those time periods, you never hear them talk about the women. The women are, yeah, I had girl children. They don't even record the birth dates. They just use them as pawns in connections to other countries.
Property. Right. The
Yeah.
property. Breeders.
Yeah, that too.
Cattle. Sheep.
I'm going
You
to
know.
put this up real quick, Gina. Um, she says, "Hey, ladies, great live talk to do."
Hey, Gina.
She said something else here that I'll. Okay. That is because religion was weaponized to control people. The people that truly controlled things throughout history always knew independent thinkers or educated people endangered their control, especially the charming, passionate ones, because they could get the masses to rise up.
Exactly. It's exactly
Ex-
true.
right. So
You know,
yeah,
I read
thank
it.
you for that, Gina, because yeah, that's exactly what it was, what it still is. It still is used as a weapon.
Can't remember if I read it or it was a show. It was a show of one of our fallen leaders just a few years ago that they had to go track into a cave. Um, so he did the same thing. This lady that was talking, she said that she played with his children and they would take her brother and like they were throwing him into the mud and he was not enjoying it. Obviously, he was crying and the leader's son would say, again, again. And they would throw him as often as that little boy, I think he was 6, would say to do it. So things haven't, and this has been, what, 10 years now? Things haven't changed that much that, we haven't learned from anything, I don't think.
It doesn't seem like it, does it? It's awful and all to reinforce the superiority of somebody who's being placed in power. And I think that's, like I said, there's a certain amount of paranoia that slips in with that too, because once you're that high and mighty, anything that like burst your bubble is somehow terrifying and sent by
Right,
evil force.
right, right. It's against you, and yeah,
Yeah.
it, yeah, that's some scary shit, some scary shit. Um, so it's a lot to ponder, and again, we will. I would say it now, but I'm not home. I don't have my notes in front of me to say the actual name of the documentary that sparked this interest. But we decided we would do a broomsticks episode because it was time. We had done 3 bloodstains, and we decided we need to jump on this. And it happens to be National Women's Day, so it's a good day to do it. And let's talk about bringing power back to women. Let's put it back in our hands. Um, and with that, I do want to remind everybody about us working with the missing and murdered when I'm indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited people. I think I spit it all out that time. So I do want to talk about the next case a little bit, Gail. Do we have an update?
Next, nothing. Crickets. They are saying the initial autopsy did not show trauma from the fight. I watched the video from the school. I will say that Next did not lay down. She fought back. So gotta give her credit there. Um, what happened was she went home, and then the next day when she got up, her mother, I believe it was her mother, reported that she called 911. She said that her body was contorting and that her hands were not functioning, and they rushed her into the hospital. I mean, that screams head trauma to me. But, now it's at the federal level because the Department of Education has bumped it up to a federal case. And there's still no autopsy results. It's like a month. So I know that they know something. I think they are afraid at the amount of outrage that they have witnessed over this incident. And I will say that it's not exclusive. Hers touched home, or theirs touched home. I misspeak that all the time. Their case touches home for me because they're both Native and abused and transgender. It's like a whole bunch of marginalized groups in one person. And she's not the only one. I will tell you, there's a million cases like this. There's a movement in Canada. So First Nation natives are on May 8th. They're holding protests to dig up the landfill because they say that a lot of the women are in the landfills. So they're actually having a protest.
Wow.
Thrown away as trash, just gone. They never existed.
Used up. Just use them and throw them away.
That's, and the indigenous, it happens across the board, but the indigenous really, I mean, my son, one of his siblings, he passed 2 years ago, and they said it was suicide. It wasn't suicide. But when they went to fight back and say, look, he was 28 years old. He was young. Yes. He had some issues, but this was not suicide. They swept it under the rug and told him he better shut up. And people were coming after my son for speaking out. He actually wrote me a big text, said, Mom, present this if anything ever happens to me. He was that scared. He said, I do not want to commit suicide. I have never wanted to commit suicide. If I come up dead, it is not suicide. And, that's pretty scary when your child has to write something like that to you because he's fighting back. I mean, that wouldn't happen to most of us if we were to fight back. But in that community, it does.
Yeah.
Well, I know it, and definitely I agree with you that in the indigenous community, so much goes wrong and so much is swept under the table and so much is denied. But in the hot society that we live in today, like right now where I am publicly, if I was to say the wrong thing politically out loud right now, they'll burn my house down. I mean, it's that serious. And just to tell you, so I mean, it does. It depends on color of skin. I think in the America that we live in, number one is your color of skin. Number two is your religion. Of
And
things
number 3 is your sexuality.
Of the things that you will be prosecuted, stoned, swam. But yes, it is heavily concentrated in the indigenous community. I mean, just 10 times over more so than someone like me with my white skin. And of course, our other brown sisters and brothers, and the G2, the two-spirited people. It's scary. I don't want to get too much into. Again, I feel like I'm leaning into politics, but I do have to put it out there. Watching a certain person last night, the way she was speaking, and it's like you are not representing the average woman in Alabama. You're just not. And when you're sitting there saying, I'm scared, well, yeah, I am too, but it's the hyper religious zealots that I'm scared of. It's those people, that person, you know, that is what scares me in this skin that I live in today, the most about being a United States citizen. And, so it's not much different than it was back in, when Jimmy was born and started kicking all that. I know he didn't officially kick it off, but he did for England and a lot of our ancestors
Right.
lived in those times.
Yeah.
Right.
Gina, we will look into that. That sounds pretty interesting, actually.
Oh yeah. I'm all about history and and nerding out. So
Hmm. And I wanted to mention anybody who is interested in Mary Queen of Scots and her story, but likes a little bit of extra drama added to it. The CW did a series called Reign that is based loosely on Mary Queen of Scots. Like it's the main character is Mary, but it's based more loosely around the history parts, and it's a nice dramatized. There's some magic in there, some witchcraft, some accusations, a whole lot of stuff, and it's really fun to watch. It's called Rain.
Francis's mother in that program is one of the most famous women ever accused of witchcraft. The only reason she didn't get toasted was because she was a queen.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it was very, very interesting. I absolutely love that show. So anybody who enjoys it, it's good.
That's something, if you could find, the link for, that is, and put it in the comments, for people like me that can go back later and find, okay, there's that.
It's an interesting program. It does that.
Let's see.
So
This is the actual show. Well, let me go over to.
she actually had a group of women that worked underneath her that were called the Flying Squadron. And they were courtiers. So basically, ladies that sold themselves but didn't sell themselves because they were given to, I don't know, princes, kings, queens. They were basically being pimped out to people that had money. And if there was a political issue, they would poison somebody to get rid of them. So they were kind of in the hire of this queen. And man, that caused some huge controversy. And it is the time period of James and, well, the generation right before him. So Elizabeth and the Tudors, that time period. So it is really interesting. She had a lot of.
I'm glad you put that up there. I was thinking RAIN.
No. Rain. Long may she reign is one of the things, but that's the link to it on the CW. I believe it's on Netflix though, if anybody wants to watch it.
So it's part did is what people to America and caused Salem and Andover and all of the things with the witch trials. It's because of the demonology and the Hammer of the Witches that were written and different religions.
Right. And I was going to say that, but of course I need y'all to fill in the blank on the name here because until I watched that documentary, I was unaware of demonology. And then it was like, wait, whoa, stop. I had to pause and I'm like, looking stuff. It's like, holy shit. And I actually, have y'all read Demonology?
No, I haven't read the whole.
I have. Again, that's some scary shit. It's like, I mean, you probably know, but it's like he is talking to someone else. He writes it in like a third party, thing. And it's almost like written as a play or something. And it is basically telling them how to torture and murder and kill witches everything that identifies, you know, a simple mole, on your body
Yeah.
identified you as a witch. If you had any kind of birth defect, or I mean, just crazy, insane stuff. So these people, took this demonology, and it was like their guide to seeking out witches. You get, the one man in the community that can read it to everybody. I mean, can y'all even imagine? He's standing out there spewing this bullshit to the community. This book that's come down from the King of Scotland. You
Hmm.
know, and he's reading this, to inform these people, and these people are looking at their people sitting next to him. I mean, it went down like that. And when you really get into the real history of it, and you discover that when we got to Salem, I don't know about in Europe and all that, but I do know by the time it hit this side of the ocean, if you accused your neighbor of being a witch, well, that meant the town, the people, the head of whoever, they got that property. If you owned a farm or, a nice little strip of land or whatever you owned, all of a sudden became theirs.
Yeah.
And it was theirs until you were proven innocent. So imagine how many were proven innocent. So, this person that just consumed all your goods could give it back. And this is the same person that's going to decide if you're guilty or innocent. I mean, it's all just madness, you know. It makes me question, did anyone have any empathy that was born back then? You know, is empathy something that we have developed over time?
I think that in some senses it was beaten out of them. So the church ran everything. And if you spoke empathetically, then you became part of the problem. So I mean, I've read some weird stories because I'm into a deep dive about Salem and Andover. There was a fire that started by lightning, and one family went out and they had like 7 people in the family, and they dug a ditch and they threw water on it, and somehow they kept their house from burning. The neighbor accused them of witchcraft because their house burned and these people prevented it from happening. It's obvious what happened. They worked.
Right. I mean, no witchcraft in that. You get out there and you save your damn house.
It was
But
just
but
wild.
yeah, well, I mean, and the motive is very obvious of why you're accusing your neighbor because hey, I want to get that house.
Yeah.
Because I do think it was if you were the accuser, like if you accused your neighbor and they proved, I think somehow you were rewarded as well. Hi, Nigel. Good to see you. It's been a long time.
Yeah, there's
I'll
wild
bring this
stuff.
up real quick. I'm not going to read it out loud just so it doesn't get flagged or anything, but
It's very true, though.
yeah, yeah.
It is that it's not a lie. And who don't you get? But my rant on it is the whole system needs to be overturned. Let's get rid of the electoral colleges. Let's really make every vote count. And that's just the end of my speech on that one. Oh, term limits, term limits. Term limits.
Yeah, because we don't need a king. We need to we need a system here. But then that's the end of my political talk also. Um but yeah, it's just wild that the excuses and the way that, like you were talking about, Terry, the accuser had ulterior motives in the accusation and how they got away with that over and over again. We're also talking about a country that, wasn't very populated. One of my ancestors was accused of heresy instead of witchcraft, and they chased her out of the town that she lived in into the wilderness. And her and most of her kids died. There's a few that survived. Obviously, I'm here. But because of what? Well, she was a woman and she was reading the Bible. That's why.
Wow. I mean, yeah, that's some scary shit. That's some
Yeah.
scary shit. Um, just because she wanted to educate herself, wanted to understand what all these people around her have been talking about. You know, how do you get this way?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have lasted long in them times. I'm if you believe in reincarnation and stuff, I have some weird ass fears that I shouldn't have. For no particular reason. The whole thing with the ocean, that's come up a lot lately. With the possibility of going to Mexico and stuff. I cannot, will not ever be on a ship. Ain't happening. I can. It ain't happening. It ain't happening. It ain't happening. I don't mind flying. I have flown from Alabama to Vegas, from Alabama to Chicago, Chicago back to Alabama. I've been in the airplane. I actually like to fly. Flying over the ocean. I mean, I get goosebumps now, just the thought of doing it. I don't, so this weird fear, I think it's got to be from some kind of a past life thing or so. So, I mean, if I did live in them times, I'm sure that I didn't live long.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think our fears show us a lot about our past life, or it had to have been that, or at least something that happened in our lives that maybe we don't remember, but more than likely it's a
Y'all,
past life something.
I gotta tell y'all, if y'all just see me crack up laughing here, my daughter Jessie, the other Jessie in my life, just a text message popped up on the top of the screen and said, "You can take your phone out of the box now because your case is there. I want y'all to look. She's not locked."
Oh my gosh.
When I've been talking to y'all and stuff on the phone, I've been carrying it around like this because it hangs in the lid there, nice for me. So if it's been sounded like I'm in a box, it's because I really have been in a box.
You're protecting a phone.
Well, because I'm notorious. I mean, that last phone I had, that's the first phone I ever owned. That was less than like $100 phone. But like a nice phone. It was the first one that I ever owned that I actually paid off, and it still worked, and I didn't break it. I mean, I paid it off, and then broke it, dropped it. That my little short stand at Dollar General there. I dropped it on the damn floor up there, and it cracked just across the top of the screen. So I mean, every other phone I've ever had, it either quit working or I broke it, in like a billion pieces. The phone I had before this last one, I think when we went in trade, well, I had a Google for years. At the time when I got that Google Pixel, I actually selected another phone. I had it less than 24 hours. I went out on a rock dig and broke the damn camera. I mean, it fell out of my pocket. I had a case on it, but it didn't have a lens protector, on that camera. And it broke the camera. It wasn't even 24 hours old. So, yes, if I get a new phone until there's a case for it, I'm walking around with it in the box.
Hey,
We need to get you one of those cases that construction workers have.
That's
Otterbox.
yeah, that's I didn't get an OtterBox. I probably should because the last phone case I had didn't really, it protected it for a long time. I'll say it did. It protected it because I am terrible. If y'all see my iPad screen now, I did good with it for a couple of years, but now it's also broken. I'm like a bull in a china shop. I can't help myself. But um, hopefully, this new case that's coming will be. It does have the lens cover for the three little cameras. It's got this screen, screen protector, full body case. So I may have to upgrade to an OtterBox.
Well, if you're going on your trip, we'll have to get you a waterproof one.
Oh, it's not even. I'm talking about that. Yeah, and my fear of flying over the ocean, and just my husband's fear of flying. Period. I don't know if anybody's seen the news lately, but like just yesterday again, a wheel fell off a plane. And it's like y'all are not helping me out here.
I keep thinking, what are y'all doing? Where are you building these planes in a tinker toy shop? I mean, it's like all of a sudden there's like this rash of things
I'm
flying plane.
honestly, you know, I had said, and I retract that statement. Maybe if I retract it and put it out there in the universe now, something will turn around. My grandmother worked at Hayes International, which is, at the airport here in Birmingham, Alabama. And her job when she retired was she was an inspector. She inspected these planes, when their time was due, whatever, that was her job. And I had made the comment because I always somehow, even though what are the chances that my grandmother really inspected the plane that I was going to be on just before I flew it? Probably none. But somehow in my mind, I would tell myself, "Oh, my grandma's like that. It's fine." And when she retired and then died several years later, I made that comment. Well, planes will never be safe again. And it's like the trickle down effect.
Whoops.
Well, oh, Terry, guess what came in yesterday?
Oh, look, hold up. Now I'm going to mess up my camera angle here because that's what I'm using to prop up here. I'll change it.
Yep, I ordered it. It came in yesterday.
Mine came yesterday too. It was a day late. That show, we're going to do the last, the end of the month, right? Because next week we're talking about the mind of stalkers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, is there any particular stalking case we want to look at?
There is the one that's kind of the most famous. We could always go with Jodi Arias. She was crazy. She was a stalker. It started off small, got big, and ended with murder.
Yeah.
So that's always a good one. It's a very, very interesting, very twisty case.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What about you, Gail and Adrian? You ladies have someone in mind? I mean,
Besides my personal stalkers, um,
well, that's what I was going to say, Gail, other than, you know, uh,
uh,
excluding ourselves.
Oh, and Gina, this book is Death Trap by M. Williams Phelps.
I do want to address a little bit on that since we showed the book. I've got so much to say on this, y'all, because, and I'm not going to obviously say it all. What I want to say about this is if you start going and looking and listening to some of the other podcasts and stuff out there, there's a lot of misinformation. A lot of misinformation. I mean, and I think a lot of them too, they're looking at this. They're still getting it wrong. And I will say that he's got, to my knowledge, he's got a lot of it right. And I know some of you people are sitting there going, "Well, Terry, how the fuck do you think that you know so much about that?" Well, I do. I was indirectly involved in this case. And I'm not going to get into all that now. Y'all will have to watch the show to find out how I was indirectly involved in this case. But I will tell y'all, don't go listening to a lot of podcasts out there if you want to learn. If you just seen the name of this book and you're like, ooh, what's that about? I want to go, read the book. That's fine, because he is as accurate as his information allowed him to be. I'll give him that. As far as I know, it's been a long time since I read it. I am going back through it again. Um, and I think I'm probably going to put it in the mail to you, Gail, next week. You probably won't have it, to read it all before we actually do the show, but I still think you're going to find it pretty damn interesting.
Oh, I'm sure.
So, but then again, by the time we do the show and what you've already learned and stuff, how you probably already, because all these other podcasts and stuff that I've listened to at this point are basically from his book. And some of them are just, I don't know if they can't read the words right, if they're dyslexic or what. One of the things that was said about a particular person, and I don't even remember which podcast it was, but they stated that she was pregnant at time of arrest, which she was, but that didn't come out for a long time. And so it wasn't like in that moment. No, it was damn months later before, so it was maybe they just stumbled on their words and stuff, but there's a lot of inaccurate information out there. And of course, I'm listening to it going, that's wrong. That's wrong. And I actually did email one of the shows. I can't remember exactly the name of it, but their information was so wrong. I was like, I can't let this be out there and not say something and know what I know, and not say something about it, because that is not accurate. So, so yes, well, is that right? Next week, The Mind of a Serial Killer. Oh, we still got another. I guess there's enough Fridays in this month, because I know we're doing kind of every other show, and I know that this that we're talking about is at the end of the month, the last Friday of the month. So yeah, y'all, like I said, if you go do your research, just know that a lot of stuff you may hear. I mean, I don't think that they are directly putting out lies. They either were skimming through the book too fast, and they're, wrote their notes down wrong for their podcast or whatever they did. So, but just know that it's not exactly accurate what's out there. If you ever seen the little, I did watch that last night. Did I send that to y'all, the 18-minute clip of Snapped?
I think
You know,
so.
it's it's fairly accurate, but how much can you get of the backstory and stuff of it, in 18 minutes? Not much. So,
Mhm.
but there again, yes, that's an interesting case. So I guess I know we were a little late. Are we walking on anybody else's time on things,
I
Adrian?
don't think so.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up. I guess Jess has already fell out of the picture. Probably rain hit over there, because I did see um, a little while ago that the storm was 11 and a half miles from me, and she's the direction it's coming from. So she may have dropped out from. I know she has a little storm phobia too. So if thunder and lightning hits, she's out of here. So everybody, thanks for watching. We hope y'all enjoyed our Friday kickoff. You can join us here every Friday, unless somebody has to have a day off or travel, or but we're gonna try to be here. Fridays, 10 Mountain Time, 11 Central, 12 Eastern. And if y'all are in the UK or somewhere I'm sorry, y'all gonna have to figure that shit out on your own. If you're watching, it's an hour before this next week.
Yeah.
So happy National Women's Day, everybody.
Y'all too.
And it's so good to see everybody's beautiful faces today.
Yes, yes. Everybody have a wonderful day, and we will be here next week.